Russian officials are urging more residents southwest of Kursk to evacuate the area as Ukrainian troops push forward into Russia. A Ukrainian military chief says that they are gaining more ground more than a week into what was their surprise attack on President Vladimir Putin and his military. Now, this is Kyiv's biggest incursion into Russia since the start of the war. This video, just into CNN, appears to show more Ukrainian forces ramping up in Ukraine's Sumy region. Well, here's a closer look at the volatile region near that border. Ukraine's Sumy region is in blue. Russia's Kursk and Belgorod regions are coloured in yellow. This is the critical area where Ukrainian troops are crossing over into Russia. CNN's Fred Plotkin is following this story for us from Berlin. What do you make of what we are seeing happening on the ground, and why?
Well, I think one of the things that you just said is absolutely correct. This is an absolutely critical area, both for the Ukrainians and for the Russians. In fact, the Ukrainians were for a long time expecting the Russians to mount an offensive from the Kursk region into the Sumy region to try and go south and push south from there. It appears as though the Ukrainians have been a lot faster than the Russians in mounting such a thing. I think one of the things that's also worth pointing out, Becky, you just showed us that video of the Ukrainians amassing on the border in the Sumy region. They apparently managed to do that completely in secret. Even Ukraine's allies seem to have had absolutely no clue that this was happening. They took their allies by surprise, obviously took the Russians by surprise as well. Now, one of the things that we are indeed hearing from the Ukrainians is that their forces, they say, are pushing on and are trying to gain more ground. Here's what we're learning.
Ukrainian troops sweeping through Russian territory. Dear Ukrainians, this soldier starts and then says his forces went into a Russian supermarket, but that Ukrainian stores have a better selection. Videos released of several areas inside Russia showing Ukraine soldiers taking down Russian flags and raising Ukraine's. And while the Kremlin claims its forces have held up Ukraine's advances in some areas, posting videos of bombed-out alleged Ukrainian vehicles, the numbers the Kremlin does admit are staggering. Almost 30 villages under Ukrainian control, more than 120,000 Russian civilians evacuated in the Kursk region alone, and more under evacuation orders in Belgorod region to the south. Russian President Vladimir Putin irate, vowing to respond while ripping into Ukraine and its Western allies.
It appears that the enemy, with the help of its Western masters, is fulfilling their will, and the West is fighting us with the hands of the Ukrainians. So, it looks like the enemy is seeking to improve its negotiating position for the future. The enemy will certainly receive a worthy response, and all our objectives will undoubtedly be achieved.
All this as Russia and Ukraine blame each other for what appears to be a major fire at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in southern Ukraine, an area under Russian control. So far, no increased radiation levels have been detected. Kiev has published little information about its offensive into Russian territory, but Ukraine's president justifying the incursion.
From the beginning of this summer, and only from the Kursk region, our Sumy region suffered almost 2,000 strikes. Artillery, mortars, drones. We also monitor every missile strike, and each such strike deserves a fair response.
And it seems Ukraine's response is not over yet, even as Moscow scrambles to prevent further loss of territory.
And that's actually something, Becky, that we've been monitoring as well. The Russians obviously saying that they're pulling additional units into that area, trying to hold the Ukrainians up. They've also posted video on all of their social media channels, really, of planes from the Russian Federation allegedly bombing Ukrainian positions, Ukrainian vehicles allegedly getting destroyed. But the fact of the matter is that the Russians are indeed asking citizens in regions that are further and further east towards the city of Kursk to evacuate those areas, which could be an indication that the Ukrainians are indeed still moving forward, Becky.
It's good to have you, Fred. Thank you. Joining us now is Shashank Joshi, who's the defence editor at The Economist, and it's extremely good to have you. Your analysis and insight so important on a day like today. Ukraine's top military commander has said his forces command 1,000 square kilometres of Russia's Kursk region. About 10,000 Ukrainian troops, as we understand it, have crossed into Russia. Ukraine has, through this war, been outmatched, but this surprise attack has been, it seems, successful. What does this change in strategy and potential shift in power balance mean for this war, do you think?
Well, first of all, Ukraine has changed the narrative. That's the most important thing. Whatever else happens, it has busted the assumption that Ukraine's on the back foot, that it can't regain the initiative. But I will say this. It is still, and we mustn't lose sight of this, losing ground in Donetsk province in eastern Ukraine. In fact, in the last couple of days, we've seen Russian forces move to within 15 kilometers or so of a very important town in the east of Ukraine called Pokrovsk. And I say this not to take away from Ukraine's remarkable achievements inside Russia in the last week, but to point out that these are all trade-offs. These have come at a cost. And so Ukraine has changed that narrative, but it must be very careful that the result isn't a loss of territory inside its own soil and what ultimately could turn out to be heavy losses inside Russia as well. It's got to consolidate these gains and understand the right time to pull back and the right time to cash in the chips that it's gained in the last 5 days.
It has more to work with going forward than it did, some 4 or 5 months ago. I mean, there is more coming into Ukraine from both the West and very specifically from the US. In a recent piece in your publication, The Economist, it was written that the delivery of the F-16s can be seen as a morale boost rather than a strategic game changer. Writing, but with numbers building up slowly, it may take time before the F-16s can have much impact. A recent report by the CSIS, another think tank, argues that Ukraine needs many more aircraft than have so far been promised. We're 2.5 years into this war. The US in particular is seeing pushback domestically for its support. Does Ukraine, are we seeing at this stage evidence that Ukraine feels more empowered and with this new equipment can be projecting, more strength going forward? For example, what impact are these F-16s going to have?
Becky, I think you answered that at the beginning correctly by pointing out that these will have limited impact. I know that some people would want to see these new systems coming in and offering some kind of decisive change on the battlefield. But in truth, the F-16s ought to be seen as a long-term replacement for Ukraine's aging and depleted fleet of Soviet-designed aircraft, MiGs and Sukhois. The fact of the matter is, these F-16s are not going to be flying American-style over the front line, swooping over Russian troops. I think what they're going to be doing in the main, in the first months of their existence at least, is to be providing air defense over Ukraine against Russian drones and missiles. They'll be sitting back tens of kilometers away from the front line, shooting down these Iranian-made drones and other cruise missiles coming in over the border. And that's a very valuable mission. But let's make no mistake, it doesn't mean they're going to be providing air cover right on the edge of the border, allowing Ukrainians to stream into Russia again. We've really got to keep expectations in check of what these planes can achieve.
Let's talk about the wider story here. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has said in taking the fight to Russia that this is key to achieving peace. And I just want you and our viewers to have a listen to specifically what he said.
It is only fair to destroy Russian terrorists where they are, where they launch their strikes from. Russian military airfields, Russian logistics. We see how useful this can be for bringing peace closer. Russia must be forced into peace if Putin wants to continue waging war so badly.
And Ukraine's head of military administration said, and I quote him here, "They are feeling what we have been feeling for years, since 2014. This is an historical event." Is this about forcing Putin's hand, getting him to a negotiating table to broker peace on Kyiv's terms rather than on Putin's terms at this point? What's your sense here?
Well, Ukraine, like all of us, is watching the American elections, and it realizes there is a chance that a Trump presidency, if that is what occurs, is more likely to cut Ukrainian aid off and to force Kiev into a deal that the Ukrainian government would view as highly unfavorable. And so you could see this kind of operation as a way of preempting some of that and saying that, first of all, Ukraine still has options, and second of all, that simply freezing the lines as they are is not an acceptable solution because, look, Ukraine is in charge of Russian soil as well. So this is, I think, absolutely a way for Ukraine to say it can strengthen its hand in any talks that occur.